but I wanted to begin with a reading from Whispers from Eternity. This is Yoganandaji's prayer. Come to me as Krishna, the divine cowherd. O Krishna, Lord of Hindustan, I sorrowed by the lonely Jamuna river, where thy flute notes thrilled the air and led lost calves to their divine home. O lotus of love, musing on the sad absence of thy delusion-dispelling eyes, I saw thine invisible spirit take form, frozen by my devotion's frost. Thy divine body of sky-blue light walked with feet of eternity on the banks of my mind, planting there the lasting footprints of divine realization. I am one of those lost calves which followed thy flower footprints on the shoals of time. Listening to the melody of thy flute of wisdom, I now follow the middle path of calm activity, by which thou hast led many through the portals of their dark past into the eternal light. Since all souls belong to thy fold, whether we move forward, are sidetracked, or are hemmed in, unmoving in the fogs of disbelief, O divine Krishna, lead us back to thy enfolding shed of everlasting freedom. O Krishna, thou reignest supreme on the heart throne of all those who know thy love. We had a Kriya initiation last night, and it was very powerful, very uplifting. And as part of the initiation, I talked a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita and how it relates to this path, these masters, our path, and particularly the technique of Kriya Yoga. And I wanted to continue along that line a little bit today. This commentary, this is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita as explained by Paramahansa Yogananda, as remembered by his disciple Swami Kriyananda. And so this is Master's commentary on the Gita. As most of you know, when he finished writing this, Master said, "A new scripture has been born. Millions will find God through this book." So, what's so wonderful about the Gita is that you can read it even without commentary. It's so clear in terms of what some of its teachings are. There are many, many deeper levels, of course, but even just to read it in one sitting, you could say, you can get a lot of guidance for life without, if it needs to be in your own language, fine, but beyond that, you can understand what Krishna is saying. We can't necessarily say we've grasped the whole of the understanding. As it says in Autobiography of a Yogi, when I think it was Dhruv Bala showed the Gita to Sri Yukteswarji and said, "Sir, do you know this book?" And Sri Yukteswar said, "No, though my eyes have graced its pages many times." And Dhruv Bala said, "Thousands have answered me differently." Because once you know the Gita, you're in God, if you really know it. Interestingly, Sri Yukteswar was in God. He was an avatar. That's pretty much, as far as we're concerned, the top of the, echelon. And still he said, "No, I don't know it." Jesus Christ was an avatar. And Master quoted his words that Christ said in the Bible, "Even what my Father knows, I know not." Which is sort of a philosophical puzzle, that if you're one with God, aren't you the same? And if he knows something, wouldn't you know it? And so on. And so it wasn't just that Jesus was saying it because that's the right thing other people should say, so he was modeling proper behavior. He was saying, "Even what my Father knows, I know not." And that's what Master said. He said, "That's why I love him so much." Because he said that. Of course, many other reasons too, but that one he quoted a lot. And even Master said that meditation is the fruit, and meditation is the flower, samadhi is the fruit. This chant that we sang in Sabhikalpa Samadhi and Nirbhikalpa Samadhi Yoga, I will find myself in myself. Master said once you're having Nirbhikalpa Samadhi, not Sabhikalpa, Nirbhikalpa, once you're one with God, you don't need to meditate. You're finished. And Master said, and that's why sometimes people will say, the flower falls when the fruit appears. But Master said, I don't need to meditate anymore. But I still do. And he said, not, as you might expect, so that others will also meditate, which is a very practical reason. If Master didn't meditate, who would meditate? If he said meditate, I don't need to meditate, but you should meditate. How many would? Where you see Master meditating, you are going to meditate. Krishna says it very straightforward. As the greater man does, the lesser men imitate. And that's how the lesser men become greater. You see? But that isn't why Master said he meditated still, even though he didn't need to. He said, because a yogi always sets aside time to be with God. Isn't that nice? That's the purpose of meditation, to be with God, not to meditate for itself, and not just, I need to meditate so I can turn into a fruit, so I can get samadhi. That's what I'm meditating for. What does that mean? To be one with God. So spend time with God now. And that's what he said. The yogi, the devotee, devoted to God, the lover of God, always sets aside time for God. If we could be connected with reunited with one of our dear loved ones who has left this body, and for me it would be Swamiji, just for an hour, wouldn't we rush to that place, and wait with, excitement for that moment, just to have another conversation, another time, more time with them. And so let us approach our meditation time in the same way, that I'm going to be with God now, and God is with me. And of course God is with us after and before and so on, but still, to make it as a special occasion. This is one way you can keep your practice fresh and new. So, even though the Gita does make a lot of sense, sometimes it doesn't. So, I'm going to read a little bit and then get to the relevant... I want to read two passages today. He is truly a yogi who, while living on earth, Krishna says, and up to the last moment of his earth life, can master every impulse of desire and antipathy. He alone among mortals is a happy human being. Only one who possesses inner bliss, who is firmly centered in the inner self, and is illumined by the inner light, depending on nothing outside the self for his understanding, attains complete liberation, both while living and after death. His doubts and hesitations removed, his karmas all obliterated, his senses subdued, his delight only in the good of all, he, the sage, attains emancipation in spirit. Remember, Krishna is talking about us, our destiny. Not he's talking about the few great ones and saying you should see some of the saints I met. Wow. He's not bragging on their behalf. He's not telling you that's what you should be in the sense of, and you're not. He's inviting us and saying, this is the goal. This is where you are headed. Even now, you are moving in that direction. So it's about you. I mean, what's the first word? Or that he mentions, he is truly a yogi. Is anyone in this room a yogi? All of you are yogis. Yes? Renunciates who are without desire or anger, controlled in mind, and self-realized, are inwardly free, whether living in this world or merged in the infinite. So then we get to a sort of a complicated two slokas. The Muni, one for whom liberation is the sole purpose of life, controls his senses, mind, and intellect, removing himself from contact with them, so far so good, by neutralizing the currents of prana and apana in the spine, which manifest outwardly as inhalation and exhalation in the nostrils. He fixes his gaze in the forehead at a point midway between the two eyebrows, thereby converting the dual current of physical vision into the single omniscient spiritual eye. Such a one attains complete emancipation. This is where we say, is it possible to have, Krishna, could you say a little more? What do you mean? How do we neutralize these prana and apana currents related to the breath and so on? I'm not going to go into this in detail, but this was one of the slokas which Master said specifically is a specific reference to Kriya Yoga. And so it's not just to meditation, it's not just to pranayama generally, it's not even just sort of an astral, you have to neutralize the currents in the Irda and Pingala. He's talking about Kriya Yoga. And because Master said it, I can say it. Otherwise, I would just be sort of philosophizing. I hope it's related to Kriya Yoga. It must be, logically, but I'm repeating Master's own words. Swamiji writes, to control those currents with the attention focused on the outward activity of closing and opening the nostrils directs one's attention more to the breathing aspect of the exercise than to the energy flow of the spine. I started in the wrong place, but you really can't start in the wrong place in this book. Anything you read is wonderful. Kriya Yoga is the science that was particularly recommended by my own guru and his line of gurus. Kriya Yoga was first given in modern times by the great Himalayan master known simply as Babaji, revered father. According to my understanding, Babaji is himself an incarnation of the great Indian master of ancient times, Narayana, who was more recently Lord Krishna himself. Babaji told his disciple Lahiri Mahashaya, whom he initiated into Kriya Yoga in 1860, that Kriya is the supreme ancient science of yoga, and that he himself in a previous body had given it to the world. This science may be called God's greatest gift to humanity for the soul's salvation. And so, this is what we are practicing as we practice Kriya and as we prepare to practice Kriya. All of these techniques are these central methods that Krishna is referring to in the Gita. Now, when I say this is the technique he means, there may be another technique very similar to Kriya Yoga that isn't exactly Kriya Yoga, but it accomplishes the same thing. And in that sense, Krishna is referring to that too. I don't mean just this specific copyrighted technique only and no other. But still, it is anything like this, but very much like this. As Swamiji was referring to alternate nostril breathing and so on, he said that's unfortunately you end up it becomes too physical. This is the danger with most pranayamas, is they become too physical. Instead of energy control, it becomes breath control. And then we say, look how wonderful it is that I can control my breath. But that's not the meaning or the purpose of pranayama. And so one of the great things about meditation and the way you deepen your awareness is by putting your attention in the spine. As you do energization, as you meditate with different techniques, try to be aware of the flow of energy in the spine. Or after your sadhana, after practicing the techniques, and when you're sitting in the silence, you can try to tune into the flow of energy in the spine, rising as you inhale, descending as you exhale. This technique is called watching the breath in the spine. And so try to feel this rising current and descending current. If you don't feel it at first, don't worry, it will come in time. Now, this is the one I wanted to read more of. This is from chapter 7 of the Gita. Okay. After many incarnations, Krishna says, the sage realizes me in my true nature. A person so illumined that he sees me as all-pervading is rare and hard to find. It is true, certainly, Swamiji writes, based on Master's commentary, that the soul must pass through many incarnations before it attains God. For many people, even one lifetime scarcely suffices them for overcoming a single deep-seated bad habit. In this passage, however, Krishna is speaking of the sage, who, after many incarnations, has reached perfection and has realized God. Remember, this is not where we aren't. This is where we are going. And how do I know you are going there? If you want to go there. That's all it is necessary, is to want to go there. You have to put action behind that desire, but having the desire first, as Master said to Swamiji, every desire has to be fulfilled eventually. And if you have the desire for God strongly enough, then your liberation is assured. The meaning here is much deeper than what it appears to be superficially. For, consider, one who is a sage must be very close to realizing God. Otherwise, he would not be truly sage or wise. We saw earlier that every inhalation can, in effect, become a birth in a new incarnation. Some say that even the heartbeat can, in this sense, be turned to advantage, each beat becoming a new life. To bring about such an effect, one would have, however, to be unusually aware. The sage, certainly not the ordinary seeker, can utilize his breath and heartbeat to pass through many births and deaths, even while inhabiting a single body. Most people, of course, must literally die and be reborn many times to accomplish any significant inner change. How to make such a teaching universally helpful? Sages, after all, don't really need to study the scripture. Their wisdom is already inscribed in the book of their own consciousness. The point for everyone to bear in mind is that time is not an essential factor in self-upliftment. As my guru said to me, habits can be changed in a day. They are only the result of mental concentration. If one has been concentrating one way, he can simply determine to concentrate in a new way. The yajna, or fire ceremony prescribed in the Vedas and mentioned often in these pages, is symbolic of the ego's voluntary self-offering to God in meditation. This ritual can be performed inwardly and constantly by the mind. Every time the tendency arises to refer back to oneself, such thoughts as, "I did it," "Why was that done or said to me?" "I am too important to be treated that way," he should mentally cast that thought into the fire of devotion, which he should keep ever burning in his heart. Consume in your mental fire everything in your nature that will not lift you toward God. Most people take a long time to confront and change their shortcomings. They lack the incentive or the will to do so. They say, "I'll get around to it someday." A thought my guru liked to express for our benefit was, eventually, why not now? Another thought has been expressed in these pages. Concentrate first on those battles which you think you can win. If you are not strong enough yet to conquer some habit, or if some other duties command so much of your time and energy that you simply cannot deal with it yet, then simply resist it mentally. Never admit to yourself that you haven't the power to overcome any defect. Every time your mind resists a bad habit, instead of embracing it gleefully, you build up more inner strength, which will enable you eventually to overcome. Thus, the incarnations that others require to pull themselves out of the mud of delusion may take you only a relatively short time. Be a strategist. Await your opportunities calmly and dispassionately. Then, when it comes, strike. Affirm your potential as a sage, even though you are still wandering in back alleys of delusion. And it won't be long before you discover that you too, quote, see God in everything. that He is your only treasure and your only reality. To pass from this understanding to the realization described in this stanza is not a very long leap. If you don't make it in this incarnation, you may find yourself ere long living on higher planes where such sages are not so hard to find. You may indeed become one of those sages yourself in time. Paramhansa Yogananda added his own assertion to that of Lahiri Mahashaya, Sri Yukteswar, and other masters of the Kriya Yoga line, that the practice of Kriya Yoga, the science taught by Krishna to Arjuna thousands of years ago, greatly accelerates the yogi's spiritual evolution. The Kriya Yogi can attain cosmic consciousness, they said, according to the depth and intensity of his practice. In 3, 6, 12, 24, or 48 years. Yogananda added wryly, I suspect he did so because few people in their lifetime will have a chance to practice for twice 48 years, that if the Kriya Yogi doesn't make it in 48 years, he may as well expect to continue the practice in his next life. And so keep these thoughts in mind, keep these statements of Master in mind, that we are seeking self-realization, we are seeking liberation and freedom, and we are going in that direction, as he explained, as we think, so we become, as we want, as we desire. That's what puts out energy that then changes our lives. So this is the positive side of desire. The positive side of desire. That if we are wanting something, we will eventually draw it to ourselves. So want God. It's the desire that eliminates all other desires. And on the other hand, if we are going in a wrong direction, then resist it mentally, as he said. Not surrender to it, not jump into it gleefully, but to say, listen, my energy is still going in this direction because of past desires. See, remember, desire directs energy. Willpower directs energy. So because of my desire, because of my willpower of the past, going down this road, somehow I'm still going down this road, but I don't want to. And just that simple, even that affirmation to ourselves, or to share it with God, I don't want to do this. Lord, I am actively resisting. Master said this directly. I don't ask that you overcome delusion. He said actually, I don't ask that you overcome temptation. I ask that you resist it. Why? Because in resisting it, eventually you'll overcome, as Swamiji just said. You see, the way we direct our mind, and even more importantly than the mind, the way we direct our heart is everything. And that will change your life. So, direct it to God, if that's what you want. And remember, God means happiness, as Swamiji said earlier in the Gita commentary. So direct it to God whenever you can. Each time you do that, you take a step closer to liberation. Each time you find yourself, not just in bad habits, it can also be in a difficult situation. For example, you may be caught up in something, whether suppose it's some complication at work that is just becoming political and stressful. Maybe it's a difficult thing to do with the family. Maybe your schedule is just hemmed in on all sides and it seems there's no time for meditation, there's no time for satsang and so on. First of all, try to use willpower to say, no matter what, I'm going to come. But on the other hand, when you can't, even after you said that, put your mind there. Say, okay, right now it's the 3-hour meditation Thursday. Okay, right now I am chanting with everybody. And then, in the middle of your surgery, Lord, maybe not. But still, focus on the surgery. But for the sake of the poor patient, but for ourselves, let's put our mind on, okay, mentally I am there. Because as soon as you mentally are there, pretty soon physically you will be there. As opposed to, oh darn, I really wanted to, or I even maybe sort of wanted to, but I can't because of my schedule. Ho hum, another day gone. You see? If we don't get to do all that we want, the option is not zero. The other option is not zero. If we can't do 100%, we could do 90. We could even do 10. So if you can't meditate for as long as you would like to right now, meditate a little bit. Just a little bit. Because even that is more than zero. And more than that, that will change your life, because you will be directing energy and it will build momentum. Our whole life, in a way, is about momentum. Moving in a certain direction helps us to continue to move in that direction. And so moving in a positive direction, even if the escalator is taking you down, if you are at least trying to march up the escalator as you go down, it will help. Because eventually you'll get off that escalator. And don't do this with a sense of guilt. I was listening to a talk yesterday where Swamiji said, if there is one word I would like to delete from our vocabularies, it would be guilt. Do your best. That's what God is asking. But be sincere in your heart. Suppose you want to, again, just to use an example, be here. And you can't be in that moment. Just mentally be banging on the bars of the prison, saying, let me out, let me out. You know, in other words, not just sitting quietly in the prison. Fine, would you have anything to eat? It's pretty comfortable, actually, if you think about it. And no one bothers me that much. And and besides, what can I do? No! Shake those bars. Say, let me out. Look for holes in the wall. Trying to get out. One person had this experience recently. It was very touching. She had wanted to set aside some time to work on a project for Master, related to this path and so on. And she just couldn't find time. Her schedule was completely filled at home. She was caring for an older relative. There were also different functions she needed to travel for and so on. And so she just wasn't able to see a way to get it done in a timely way. But she was pushing. I'm going to do as much as I can. She would do a little bit of it whenever she could. It was sort of a long-term project. So she was working on it whenever she could. And then suddenly, having done everything she could do and praying, she wasn't even worried. She wasn't saying, I've got to finish it. She was just saying, let me do what I can do. Suddenly, her sister called and said, I will take the relative to my home for some time. And then the husband said, you know what, I will go and do all this traveling and attend all these functions, but you needn't go. She did say, how about I needn't go? It wasn't that it just occurred to him miraculously. She put the thought in his mind by expressing it. How about I not go? He said, that's fine. And so suddenly, with no time at all possible in her schedule, no way, there's just no way, suddenly she had days on end, all by herself, and could completely pour herself into this, and she did. And so don't underestimate God's willingness to and ability to just change everything. As I told you, I had one prayer. I said, Divine Mother, I know nothing can be done to help this situation, but it would be nice. Because I really felt it. I felt hopeless. It wasn't such a big situation, but I did feel hopeless. And instead of saying, it's hopeless, which is how I felt, I at least said, Divine Mother, it is hopeless. But still, if something could be done, some tiny bit of hope. And in the next 24 hours, she changed everything. And not just from one person, from like 4 or 5 different people. I don't want to go into the whole story right now. That's what really shocked me, how pervading it was. Unless they all got together and said, hey, let's plan something for him. But I don't think so, because they didn't even know each other. So never underestimate what she can do. Just imagine when you're a child what it looks like to see people driving cars. I mean, it's amazing. And then driving airplanes. I mean, that's still amazing for most of us. Swamiji, when he was a child, said to his father, when will I learn to drive? He was about 5 and already making plans. And probably to come to Chennai. But his father said, when you're 18. And Swamiji just thought, 18? He might as well have said never. Who can imagine when you're 5 years old ever being 18? It seems like eternity. And so Dharmini said when she was a child, she often had dreams of driving, and she was always driving away, but towards something. When she was a young child, she said, I am going to live, when I'm an adult, I'm going to live in California. And she was, very young. I don't know, 4 years old or something like that. And I don't know if she'd even been to California before, but she just knew. And in fact, she did. She didn't add and then Chennai, but still, at least she got California at 4. It's pretty good. And so, the way we put our minds, God basically gives us what we want. And so if our minds are going in a less than most uplifted direction, He gives us those things. Our own force of willpower, according to natural law, gives that to us. And you might say, well, but doesn't God want us home? Doesn't He want us to be with Him? So if we're going away from Him, why doesn't He grab us? And so if we're going in a wrong direction, why does He encourage that in a certain sense? And I can give the there's one interesting explanation the Catholics give. They say there's two aspects to God's will. One is that which He wants, and the other is that which He allows. You see, He allows these things to happen. He doesn't want them to happen, but He allows it to happen. Why does He allow us to go in wrong directions? Because it is the only way we will learn. Have you had that experience? It's sometimes easier to observe in someone else, where they're just not getting some obvious thing. So it's easier with children because it's a little more contained. Not so easy with one's own children, but anyway. I was a school teacher. That's how I can narrow this whole thing down into see it in someone else and a child that is not your own, sort of very specific. But you see, for example, that with children, you say, don't, please share the toys with each other. Why? Because otherwise people's feelings get hurt. But I don't want to share it because I want to have it myself. And so after begging, pleading, giving discourses on the Gita, when nothing works, then all you can do is just say, okay, we have to let the person live out the natural consequences of their actions, of their behaviors. That's really how it has to happen. God says the same thing. If you have natural consequences, not unnatural, if you say to the child, share with someone to be kind, and then the child says, no, I won't share, then you say, fine, then sit in the bad chair and do all these horrible things. But that's unkind. They'll feel the unkindness of that and they won't understand. You're saying, be nice! Doesn't work. Because you scare them into being nice. And so then they just know, all I have to do is fake it. And then as soon as no one's looking, I can get somebody else. So we don't want to teach them that. So you just see what happens. They don't share the thing. They take it away from somebody. And a little bit later, somebody bigger comes along and takes it away from them. And they say, oh, this is horrible. I hate that. And we say, you see? You see what it's like to be on the receiving end? And that will usually help them to learn. The natural consequence. That's all God does for us. He says, here it is, everything you want. And we say, ugh, Bandam. Because once we have it, we find it still didn't give us what we want. I have to say, one trick I used sharing with children was that they would say, I had the shovel, but now he has the shovel and I want it back. And so I'd say, you had the shovel for a long time. And so how about you let him have the shovel for 5 minutes, and then it will be your turn. Excellent. Because I discovered that young children have no sense of time. And so in 5 minutes, we were already, dancing in some farm with the fairies and dropped the shovel on the ground. Who even remembers the shovel? And the other thing was that they, after a while though, they didn't like all this, the one, I want the shovel, and he has the shovel. So I'd say, you can have the shovel for 5 minutes, and then you can have the shovel for 5 minutes. And so then the children used to this by now said, you can just have it now. Just, because who wants to be, just forget it. Just take it now. It was very sweet, but it was, again, fair. I didn't say, how dare you hog the shovel? There you go. Poor child. And that child's going, Because you see, when you see two children in a fight, and I'm going to stop in this whole direction, but I have stories. But when you see two children in the fight and one is crying, you instinctively, naively say, oh my gosh, what happened? And then the other person is saying, the one who's not crying is like, you say, what did you do to this poor crying child? And the crying child is going, There's usually two sides to the story. So keep that in mind. What did you do that started this whole thing? So anyway, and some of them are very clever at hiding it. So God tolerates us in the same way. He allows us to go in these directions because it's the only way we learn. As Swamiji said, it takes one incarnation to overcome a bad habit, if we're lucky sometimes. If we have Kriya, we can get a lot more done in one lifetime. But it's because of the way we overcome it is by drinking it to the lees, as they say, the leaves, the very bottom. And then saying, you know what, this just doesn't attract me anymore. It doesn't work. It doesn't give me what I wanted, so I don't want it. That's why we're not attracted to in so many directions now in our lives that are not helpful, because we already did it. We've already done it. And even if we may not remember doing it, we remember the result of doing it, which is, it didn't work. It didn't bring me happiness, and therefore I don't want it anymore. That's the subconscious desire not to do it, comes from having done it. And so keep that in mind when our minds are going in less helpful directions now, that how long is it going to take before I discover that this too is something that finally didn't give me what I wanted. It doesn't mean we quit all our jobs and move to the Himalayas and so on. God has placed us here to work out certain karma that has to be done in this way. But still, just because we are not in the Himalayas and we are in the office doesn't mean we have to be in the office 23 hours a day. And by that I mean not only literally, and if so, I'm sorry if that's your situation, but mentally also. Waking up in the morning, I have a meeting, I have a meeting, I have a meeting. Then getting on the way, I have a meeting, I have a meeting. Going in the meeting, here's the meeting, here's the meeting. And then leaving, what a meeting, what a meeting, what a meeting. The meeting was an hour long. And then after that, just be with God. Be with God in the meeting too. Just say, Divine Mother, wow, I had a friend who had difficult meetings to sit through, and the boss was very critical, not only of the general thing of going on, but of the people in the meeting. And so would say, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, and this isn't being done. How many times have I said? And so she would be. And so he kind of would see her every now and then, almost like, do you want me to pause so you can catch up? At least someone is paying attention. She was writing Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru, Om, the whole time. Okay? So let that be our constant thought. Om Guru, until we find him. We meet him and we find God. So God bless you all.